Assalamu alaikum, dear students. How are you all? Today we are going to continue from where we left in our last class, that is after successive ratio. So today we will understand what is proportion. First of all, let's give you an example what we mean when we say proportion. Okay, let's say for example, as given in the book, okay, let's say Shohag bought a packet of chips with taka 10 and 1 kg salt with taka 25 from a shop. So what is the ratio of the packet of chips and salt? It should be 25:10, because he bought salt with taka 25 and the packet of chips with taka 10. So 25:10. If we divide it both with 5, what do we get the ratio? That is 5:2. Okay. Similarly, if we consider another scenario, you can say, if in a class, suppose there are 70 students in the class of Shohag, okay, so there are 50 boys and 20 girls. So what would be the ratio of boys and girls? 50:20, right? So if we again divide this with 10, both of them, if we divide with 10, what do we get the ratio? 5:2. So what I'm trying to say is, in both the cases the ratios are equal. So if you find a scenario where we have 4 quantities, you can see what are the 4 quantities. One is salt, another is packet of chips, one is number of boys, another is number of girls. So if you see that in both the scenarios the ratios are equal, okay. So if you see such sort of scenario where the ratios are equal, then there we can say that we have created one proportion, okay. If we find out that in both the cases the ratios are equal, then we can say that these 4 quantities make what? One proportion, okay. So of the 4 quantities, if the ratio of first and second quantity and the ratio of third and fourth quantity are equal to each other, you have seen already, right? Like the first ratio was also 5:2, the second ratio was also 5:2. So the ratio was equal. Then the 4 quantities form a what? Proportion. So for forming a proportion, we need to have 2 scenarios where the ratios are equal, okay. Each quantity of proportion is called proportional, okay. So what is proportion? It's very easy. Like, you need to have 2 scenarios and 4 quantities, and the 4 quantities, the ratio in between the 2 scenarios should be same. Like in the first case, if the ratio is 5:2, the second case also the ratio should be 5:2. Then only these 4 quantities together will form a proportion, okay. So now from proportion we can actually make a new formula, that is, so this is first case, this is second. First case 5:2, second case 5:2. We know that ratio can be written as fractions, right? So 5:2, if we write it as a fraction, we can write 5/2, and the second case also the same ratio, we can write it as 5/2. So since both the ratios are equal, we can write 5/2 equals to 5/2. So from this we can actually create a formula. From a proportion, if we have proportion, we can say that first quantity, so this is first quantity, this 5 is first quantity, and this 2 is second quantity, this 5 is third quantity, and this 2 is fourth quantity. We have 2 different scenarios, so we have named the different ratios as quantity, okay. So this is first quantity, second quantity, third quantity, and fourth quantity. If you just consider the example which I said about, this was what? Salt, right? This was chips, and this was boys, and this was girls, right? So we have 4 different quantities. So if we make from the ratio, we can create a formula, that is first quantity by second quantity equals to third quantity by fourth quantity. So first quantity by second quantity equals to third quantity by fourth quantity. So if we have an equal sign in between, we know that we can cross multiply. So what can we write from in the second line? Or first quantity into fourth quantity equals to second quantity into third quantity. So if you have a scenario of a proportion, let's say I'm talking about a proportion where we have only three quantities. So you have to determine the fourth quantity. For example, let's say 4 is to 2. Okay, this is a ratio. And in another second case, let's say I'm writing 40 is to x. Okay, so I have two different scenarios, but I'm saying that both these ratios are proportional. Okay, so I'm asking you to determine x. So how will I determine? I will use this formula. We know that first quantity into fourth quantity equals to second quantity into third quantity. So which is the first quantity over here? The 4 is the first quantity. Okay, second quantity is 2, third quantity is 40, and fourth quantity is what? X. Okay, so we can write first quantity, that is 4, into fourth quantity, that is x, equals to second quantity into third quantity. So second, 2 into 40. So or x equals to 80 divided by 4, because if it is 4 into x over here, if we shift into the right side, it will become what? Divided. So we can write or x equals to 20. So if we have a proportion where, if we have two ratios where both of them are proportional, we can easily find out an unknown quantity of over here. Okay, so this method of finding at the unknown quantity is also known as method of finding unknown quantity from proportion is known as rule of 3. Okay, so if I say that I have two ratios which are proportional and one of the quantity is unknown, we can easily find it out in this way by using this formula. Okay, first quantity into fourth quantity equals to second quantity into third quantity. You will find it in page 22 as well of your book. Okay, so let's do some examples so that you can understand. So I have a question over here. Example 3. Determine the third quantity of 8, 7 and 14. So I have to determine the third quantity. Okay, so since I have to determine the third quantity, so the third quantity is missing. So 14 is the fourth quantity, I know. 7 and 8 is the first quantity, 7 is the second quantity. So we can write, we know first quantity, just write the formula, into fourth quantity equals to second quantity into third quantity. So, or first quantity is 8, so 8 into fourth quantity is 14. Third quantity, second quantity I know, that is 7, into third quantity I don't know, so I write it as x. Okay, so, or we don't necessarily need to multiply, we just write it 8 into 14 by 7 equals x, because here 7 we need to like separate the x, right? So 7 is in multiple form with x, so if it comes on the opposite side of equal sign, we know that it gets divided. So here 7 1s are 7, 7 2s are 14. So therefore what we can write, that is x equals to 16. So this is our required third quantity. Okay, very simple. Just follow the formula and you can easily find out the third quantity. Okay, now we'll move on to our next topic, that is continued proportion. Suppose you have two ratios which is in the form of like this: 5:10 is to 10:20. Similarly, similar form of as in like when you are making successive ratio. Okay, so suppose you have ratios where in such a form that the second and the third quantity are same. Okay, so this type of ratio is actually called continued proportion. I'm giving you another example. For example, 4:8 is to 18:16. Okay, so 5:10 is to 10:20. When we write it as successive ratio, we can write it as 5:10:20, or this we can write as 4:8:16, right? So no, sorry, my mistake. This cannot be written as this way. So suppose you have the same ratio over here, both sides. Okay, 5:10 means the second and third quantity both are same. These sort of ratios are known to be continued proportion. So if you write it as A is to B, suppose this is what, first quantity, this is second quantity, this is third quantity, this is fourth quantity. So if we write it as A, B, C and D, we can write A is to B is to, since B and C is same, so actually we write this as B and this we write it as C. So A is to B is to B is to C, like this. In this case, if we divide, proportion means what? Proportion means, first of all, we need to understand what is proportion. Proportion, as I said in my previous topic, that is, in both cases the ratio would be same. Now what do you understand by continued proportion? Continued proportion is the difference between proportion and continued proportion is the second both ratios are equal, but the difference is in these two cases the second and third quantity are same. In proportion, it was not necessary that the second and third quantity will be same, but in continued proportion the second and third quantity needs to be same. Okay, so we can write, since it's a proportion, we can write that is A by B equals to B by C. Okay, so we can write, if we cross multiply, what do we get? Or AC equals to B square. So this is another formula which we get from continued proportion. I'm again telling the difference between proportion and continued proportion. Proportion can be of this 5 by 2, 5:2, 5:2. Not necessarily the second and the third quantity will be what? Same. But in continued proportion, 5:10, 10:20. You see, 5:10 means 1:2 over here, and this also 1:2. But the difference is, over here the second and the third quantity both will be same. This is when we call them continued proportion. Normally in a proportion, when we consider two ratios, the ratios will be same, but not necessarily the second and the third quantity. Okay, so that's the difference. Okay, now let's move on to an example. So I hope this is clear. So from continued proportion, we can write down a formula that is B square equals to AC or AC equals to B square. Okay, so let's do example 4, where it's given, the question is over here actually. If the first and third quantities of a continued proportion are 4 and 16, determine mid proportional and continued proportion. Okay, so first of all you need to find the mid proportion, means actually they are talking about B. Remember that in a continued proportion there are only 3 quantities. Why? Because the second and third quantity are both are same. Okay, so when they are talking about mid proportional, they are actually talking about the second quantity. So after finding out the second quantity, we need to also write the continued proportion as well. So we already know that this is the formula, that is B square equals to AC, right? So the first and third quantities is given, let's say that is 4 and first and third quantity. So 4 is to, I'm writing it as using A is to B and B is to C, this format. Okay, 4 is to B. Since I have to find out the mid proportion, that's why I'm just writing it as B. 4 is to B is to B is to 16. So this is my first quantity, this is the third quantity, this is the mid proportional. Okay, so from here I can write 4 by B equals to B by 16, or 4 into 16 equals to B square, cross multiplying 4 into 16 B into B, or b square equals to 64 or b equals to root 64. So we know that what is the root 64? We can, square root of 64 is 8. So mid quantity, the mid proportional is 8. So what will be my continued proportion? My continued proportion will be 4 is to 8 is to 8 is to 16. Got it? So this is how we solve a problem from continued proportion, and the previous one was from just proportion. Okay, let's give an example, another example. So following example 5, if the price of 5 notebooks is taka 200, what is the price of 7 notebooks? Okay, if the price of 5 notebooks is taka 200, what is the price of 7 notebooks? So if you can see, we know that we can solve this with unitary method, but since we are doing proportion method, so we will try to see how to solve using proportion method. Here you see, if the number of notebooks is increased, the price of notebooks will also increase, right? Because 5 notebooks, price of 5 notebooks is 200, so obviously the price of 7 notebooks will be higher, right? So if we can, the ratio of the number of notebooks equals to the ratio of prices of notebooks, right? Because since the price is dependent on the number of notebooks, right? So if number of notebooks increases, the price of notebooks will also increase. So we can write 5 is to 7, that is the price. Okay, means the notebooks. 5 notebooks, 7 notebooks. So the ratio 5 is to 7 equals to taka 200 is to the price of 7 notebooks. Okay, so in that case we can write 5 by 7 equals to taka 200 by the price of notebooks, 7 notebooks. As a result, the price of 7 notebooks is 7 into 40 divided by 5 equals to 280. Got it? So this is an example where we are using the proportion formula, that is 5 is to 7 equals to taka 200 is to price of 7 notebooks. So 5 by 7 equals to 200 by this. So in this case we can easily find the price of 7 notebooks. So where the proportion, we are following the method of proportion over here, where this is the first quantity, second quantity, first quantity and second quantity. Remember that ratio is always formed between the same 5, number of notebooks 7, price of notebooks 200, price of 7 notebooks, which we need to find out. So ratio is always formed between similar type of quantities, right? 5 is to 7 for notebooks, 200 is to price of 7 notebooks for the price. Okay, in this way we can find out the price of 7 notebooks. Let's give another example given in the book. 12 persons can do a work in 9 days. Okay, at the same rate of working, how many days will take to complete the work? So 12 person 9 days. Okay, 12 person 9 days, 18 persons, obviously the days will be less, right? Because the number of persons is increasing. So we can write 12 is to 18 equals to 9 is to required time is to 9. Okay, 12 is to 18 equals to required time is to 9. Okay, so in this case, when we cross multiply, we can easily find out. Just write the formula. 12 by 18 equals to required time by 9 days. Okay, so you can also please see the solution where they have mentioned out that it is to be noted that If the number of persons be increased, then the period of time will be reduced. Again, if the period of time is to be reduced, number of persons will have to be increased. Okay, so the simple ratio of the number of persons equal to the inverse ratio of time. Because you see, if normally what would I have done, we would have written 12:18 equals to 9 to the required time, right? But since we know that since the number of persons are increasing, the number of days would what? Decrease, right? So we will like inverse the time, actually the ratio of the time. Okay, so 12:18 equals to, normally we would write 9 days is to this, but since the time is actually getting reduced, so we write the reverse ratio over here. So that's why 12:18 equals to required time is to 9 days. For this reason, after this we can find the required time, that is what? 6 days. Okay, so I hope this examples are clear. I will give you some tasks, that is from exercise 2.1, solve number 6 and 5, and from 4 C, D and E. From 4 solve C, D, E, and 5 and 6. Okay, solve and send it to me on WhatsApp. Okay, thank you very much.